Hey, it's Tim here, and in 2020.4, Tableau have added the ability to now work with different predictive modeling functions inside of Tableau Desktop and the browser as well. To show you this, I'm actually going to start off in Tableau Desktop. We're going to connect to Superstore Sales. We're going to build a very basic line chart. If you haven't seen my other video on extending the date axis range, that is a really useful video to watch before you watch this one, because I will be doing that a little bit here, and it's just good context for what's going on in this video. So I won't be covering it, so go watch that video, and I'll see you back in a bit. I'm going to connect to Superstore Sales here, and we're going to hop right in. Essentially, we're going to wait for this to load, and we'll have our data set pretty much ready to go. Now, the key thing I want to do here is just build out a simple line chart. I'm not going to try and do too much education of predictive models here. I'm just going to try and show you the predictive models and show you what's new. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag sales onto rows, and then I'm going to drag order date onto columns. That by default brings in a discrete year, if that makes sense. I'll make it a continuous month, and that gives us this nice timeline we've got here. Now, in 2020.3, they added the ability to do model quantile and model percentile, okay? And essentially, these are sort of methods of doing predictive analysis. They're sort of two functions, as you would call it in Tableau terms. And so what we're going to do is we're actually just going to use one of them. We're going to use the model quantile one, because that is actually quite a straightforward one to show on the screen and explain. The percentile one is more of a range-based sort of predictive model. So with the quantile one, what we can do is we can choose the median, and then we can see how that actually behaves, because the median is supposed to reflect essentially the middle of the data. So 50% of the data should fall above it, and roughly 50% should fall below it, according to the model. So let's go ahead and create a calculation. And we're just going to bring this here into the middle, and we have our calculation window ready to go. Now, one of the things you can do is, if you don't know how to write these functions, you can just type in the name model in this case, and you'll see model percentile and model quantile. We're going to use quantile here in this particular case, and it's going to actually give us some hint as to how the model should be written, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write it as if I'm not putting any variables into this. So I'm just using the standard function, which in this case is a linear regression. Okay, so you can see this sort of nomenclature here. First thing it wants is the quantile. So if I just type in 0.5 for the median, that's going to work quite nicely. And then the target expression is the sum of sales in this case. In the other video, you'll see that I suggested that we shouldn't be actually typing this out. I'm quite comfortable with Tableau, so I know how to do this myself. But if you want to make sure you don't get it wrong, then what you want to do is drag them from the menu bar. In fact, that's what I'm going to do for this next one, because the predictor expression in this case is the month date, and I need to make sure it's the correct one. So let me just click and drag here. I'm holding Command on the Mac while I do that. On a Windows, it's Control, and we pretty much have everything we need here. The last thing is obviously this date truncation is causing us a problem. You'll see here we get the error, cannot mix aggregate and non-aggregate arguments with this function. We've got sum of sales here, which is an aggregate. The model is basically encapsulating all of this. So the thing we actually need to fix here is the date truncation. So the way to sort of make this an aggregation is to throw an attribute at it, essentially. So ATTR, that's a good old trick. If you've used Tableau for a while, you know that trick basically. If you need to aggregate text or something like that, attribute is an absolute winner. In this case, it makes a lot of sense because we're working with dates, and the dates are like, think of them as buckets. So we need to actually just attribute it to the whole month, not just the particular day, if that makes sense. So I mean, I probably murdered that description, so let's not go into that in this video, maybe another video on that. But long story short, we need to make sure that it's all an aggregate. So here we have our model, and I'll just call this example 1, and I'm actually going to call this linear regression. Yeah, I'm just going to call this linear R. Because I know it is. I'll show you how I know that it is in a second. So hit apply. And what we'll do is we'll actually put this onto the canvas, and I won't close the calculation window. So let me just make this a little bit smaller, and I'll bring this down here just off screen, and we'll actually drag the example 1 right next to sales. And this will actually draw another chart. You can see the 2 lines there. And what we can do is we can actually dual axis these so that they lie on top of each other. The last thing to do, of course, is to synchronize the axis so it's really, really clear. And now we have it. So the whole point of this linear regression and the quantile that I've chosen is that essentially this model predicts that half the values are going to fall above and below. So it's the exact middle of sort of the data set. And it generally sort of looks at the data set in a very simple way. Now, the reason I know this is a linear regression is if I actually go to the Tableau documentation on this, where they have advice on choosing a predictive model, this is actually new in 2020.4, they actually have this page, and the default function that came with model quantile and model percentile was actually the linear regression. So you don't actually need to specify it because it is the actual default. So if I go back to my calculation here and I just put my mouse in here, you'll see that if you look at this really, really long expression here, that the model has a different way of describing the model if you want to. So you can either do it the simple way, which is on the left, quantile, target expression, predictor expression, or you can do model and then model, quantile, target expression, and predictor expression. Okay, so model, quantile, target expression, and predictor expression. So this one on the right actually has the specificity of the model you want to run. So we actually need to do that in this case to make things work a little bit better. Now, in order to do that, I'm actually going to split this out onto multiple lines so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so let's clean up this calculation. I'm just going to go up to this 0.5. I'm actually going to go onto a separate line like so. Then I'm going to go to the sum and I'm going to open up a separate line. Then I'm going to go to the attribute. I'm going to open up a separate line again. And I'm going to go to the final. I think that's pretty much it, actually. I don't need to do any more of that. What I can do is I can put these brackets in new lines just so that it's easy to know where things start and where they end. If you look at this date truncation, actually, what we can do is this should actually go back one here, because this is all just one function, and actually that's the last bracket here that actually we started over there. One thing you could do if you've got a bit of OCD is do that so that the brackets are in line. Then you can of course highlight everything and just tab them in one so that everything's sort of nice and neat. So this is great. One of the new features in 2020.4 is the ability to do block comments. So the way you do that is you could do something like this, /*, say something, and then say more here and more, and then you can close out on a new line with that, and that actually does a block comment. It's a really cool feature. Check out my video on that. But here, what I now want to do is add in the new functionality. If I click in here, you'll see that it gives me this ability to add a model. So what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to specify a model. Okay, in order to specify a model, we just need to basically create a new line, and I'm just going to do a double space there. I'm just going to type in model, and I'm going to do equals, and I'm just going to do speech marks because that's typically what you do to enter text. And I'm going to do a comma just to make sure that that's working. Now the calculation still thinks it's got an error. I think what I've done here is I've actually put the speech marks in the wrong place. So if I do that there, and then if I just type in linear in here, let's just make sure this is correct. Sometimes I forget the notation. If I get it wrong, we can go to the documentation and search. There we go. I think I got it right. So what it didn't like is it didn't like the space that I had there before. And then previously I didn't put the speech marks in the right place. So it's very fussy. It's only going to sort of be happy once you've put everything in exactly the correct place. Now, you can see here, I've rewritten this in the new format. I'm just going to move it here to the top right so we can see the chart more clearly here at the bottom. And if I just hit apply, you'll see that nothing changes because this is the same model we were using before. It's actually the default model, okay? So now we can actually start playing with some of the new models in 2020.4. So the new one of the new ones is a I can't even say this, a regularized, oh man, this is a real tongue twister. Let's see how many times it takes for me to get this right. Regularized linear function. There we go. I got it. Woo. So this one is actually quite easy to type. Thankfully, you don't have to type that sort of mouthful. You can just type in RL. If I was to say in better terms, this model will find a line that generally fits the trend. It's not as fussy as the linear regression in terms of following the trend, if that makes sense. So let's just type in RL and hit apply, and you'll see that it's ever so slight change there. If I just do, if I just copy this out here, what I can actually do is I can be really smart. I can actually comment out that line, and then what I can do on a new line is copy this. And what we can do is actually just comment in and then comment out pieces of the calculation. So let's just paste this here, and we can say that this is linear. Okay. And now if I hit apply, because this has been commented out, it won't work. So if I did apply, you'll see the line shifts ever so slightly. It's the most subtle of changes. And then if I cross that out and go down to a new line, double forward that, it's commented out, you see the line changes back. So it's probably not a good example here. This probably will work better in a slightly different sort of time frame, but essentially that model is now available for you to try. And then the last one we're going to try is a Gaussian model. So let's just go in here and hit enter, go in again. I'm going to use a double space. I'm going to comment out the first one, go // and then comment out the last one, --. And what I want to do here is the terminology for this, I forget this, so I'm just looking up on my second screen here, is GP. So GP is the actual expression. So let's go ahead there and hit apply. And you can see that this is a very different model. It actually pretty much follows our trend in a very interesting way. And so there we have it. We have the two new models that have been added, the regularized, I still can't say it, regularized linear model and the Gaussian model that have been added alongside the linear model, which was the previous default. And you can of course use this for the model quantile and model percentile functions that are now available as predictive functions inside of the calculation window or Tableau desktop, or even in the browser. So that's pretty much it. That's the feature in a nutshell. I highly encourage you to actually go to Tableau's documentation. I know I'm a little bit of a shill for Tableau's documentation. I'm probably a shill for Tableau, but there's great content here in the documentation. I can't emphasize enough how often people come to me for help and I just go to the documentation. And I feel really bad when I send people the document as if to suggest that they hadn't thought to read it. But it is an easy mistake to make. You wouldn't expect a software company to go into this much detail in terms of describing features that, you know, are actually generally not exclusive to the piece of software. These models are not necessarily exclusive to Tableau. They can be found in any statistical tool pretty much. But as you can see here, Tableau have done a nice job of really summarizing when you can use this model. So linear regression is the default, as I said to you earlier on. Use when you have only one predictor and the predictor has a linear relationship with your target. Use the regularized linear regression. I mean, they've got to come up with a better name for that. Come on. Use when you have multiple predictors, especially when the predictors have linear relationship to the target metric, and those predictors are likely affected by similar underlying relationships or trend. I mean, I just zoned out after the first sentence there. But if you're into this stuff and you're being asked or you're being pressed to start to use these functions or use these capabilities in some of the way you do your work, then it's nice to be able to have them available to you. And of course, you can then start to, you know, put them out there and see how people challenge the models or choose which model is the best one and so on and so forth. But it's just great to have these features there. And you can see that, you know, it's reasonably easy to add them to Tableau, to be brutally honest. It's not a ton of work, not like R or something else where you have to do a lot of data framing and sort of description of what you're about to do. The Tableau calculation is super simple. So anyway, I'm rambling on now. Let's end this video. If you've enjoyed the video, you know what to do. If not, you know, drop a comment below. Let me know what you'd like to see instead, or send it to someone you don't like. They might appreciate it more. Thank you. I'll catch you in the next one.